Hi guys, welcome to the 80 level roundtable. Here today with us we have Aaron Sims Creative. Could you guys maybe introduce yourself very quickly and tell us a little bit about your company, what do you guys do, and what are you working on?
Yes, of course. Yes, I'm Aaron Sims. I'm the founder of ASC, Aaron Sims Creative. We are a design visual effects company. I have been in the industry since the 80s doing makeup effects, making monsters from the 80s horror films like Evil Dead 2, From Beyond, Fright Night, Elm Street movies, things like that, fun stuff. And then into the 90s, into visual effects, working for these guys like Rick Baker, Stan Winston, some really big heavy hitters. And then started my own company in Aaron Sims Creative in 2005, and started kind of got out of the effects industry a little bit and jumped right into more of a design company to start with, and then we've evolved back into the effects house and kind of do a little bit of everything. And now we're focusing on our own IP and creating our own movies, books, and video games. But that's pretty much me. Tyler, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Tyler Winther. I'm the head of development at ASC, Aaron Sims Creative. I joined the team to help build out our original content. Prior to ASC, I was working with teams at Universal. I spent time at Sony. I did a little stint in management at Management 360, and yeah, here I am. So Aaron and I have been working really hard on coming up with some great original work for the company. We've done a lot in a reasonably short amount of time. So we're very proud to be able to share some of that today. And talk more about kind of what the future holds for us, and more about the work that I believe that you saw initially. I think we put out a teaser trailer for one of our originals called Dive, which seems to have been getting a lot of attention lately. So yeah, we look forward to sharing more over the course of this podcast.
Cool. Thank you so much. So guys, we did a little bit of research on the website, of course, and before the podcast, and you have this cool concept, which is like called from sketch to screen. Could you talk a little bit about that? Like, what does that mean? And maybe also touch on how did this change over the years? Because you guys have been around for, I mean, in the industry, it seems like since the very inception of the industry, and just keeping the company running for the last like 25 years. How did this idea of sketch to screen kind of change? Like, what were the steps before and what are the steps now that you need to undertake?
Yes, of course. So yeah, sketch to screen really represents the idea of concepting the idea, working closely with the directors, the writers early on, and designing what that story, that project, that world that you're going to create, either a film, TV, game, or whatever it may be, and designing it. So it's called sketching it and working it all the way through. Understanding the importance of what the final result of what you're actually going to deliver in the end, whatever that may be, TV, video game, or movie, that you're designing it early in the early days, knowing what the end result's going to be. And that would seem in a lot of ways like it's pretty standard, but it really isn't. And it used to be like the old days of films. They did. They really worked out what the film was going to be early on before, going into production, and then realizing in edit that they have to go back and redo their movie in a lot of ways because it didn't work, because it didn't plan it well. That's what we try to avoid in our process, which we call sketch to screen, is just this. You're really planning the movie out and through with the creatives and the director and the writers by designing what that movie's going to be. And so how that's changed for us too, and how it's evolved, is that now we have really incredible tools like Unreal to be able to create these not only the designs, but early days and even doing previs, but understanding how that's going to work throughout the entire production. And we're exercising those muscles right now with our project called Dive. many others too that that are more on the studio base. That is ones we can't really talk about, but Dive is one that we can actually, since it's our own IP, our own project. We're able to R&D and test this process with this new medium in a lot of ways. This new software, semi new software, in the sense new in the sense of how it's being utilized.
Yeah, you actually kind of preceded my next question, because I wanted to learn, why did you guys decide to kind of start embracing more of the real-time VFX workflow, and what are the advantages that Unreal kind of gives to you that other software like the more traditional VFX pipeline doesn't give? I mean, maybe like the immediacy of it, right? So that you can see the result immediately at the render, and you don't have to wait that much. So what would you say? And we can talk about like Dive and like what was your experience using Unreal for that, and what advantages did you get in terms of like maybe speed, iteration process, all that stuff.
Yeah, no, there's Unreal. We started using Unreal a couple of years ago. We were doing a lot of virtual reality and augmented reality and cinematics, and so that was, my background being an artist, a sculptor, a painter, and also traditional designer, um, and has been working in the industry doing effects for my entire life for the most part. Found that when I saw that my colleagues and everybody that we were working with in our own team that were actually how they were using Unreal, I started to just be curious about, what if we could take this to a new level. And then, like I think a lot of people, I get inspired by other artists and other people, what they're able to do. Like my industry, the why I'm in this industry is because of inspiration of artists and filmmakers. And I think that when I saw some really cool results in Unreal that were being done, and then I saw what our team was doing, I thought, well, it's time for me to explore that with my team and really push how far we can take this to use it as a final product, not only like just for VR or AR or games, but for a final VFX. Because the biggest problems that we actually had in the past, and where I got frustrated with visual effects in general, is the time-consuming process it takes with the amount of people that have to create something, and then the wait. The waiting is the worst. And then the big thing, what we see, the advantages of this is the actual the real time aspect of it, but also just giving the director, the filmmakers, the writers, everybody a chance to look at what they're creating with us in real time, and be able to change that in real time and not wait and then say, wow, we ran out of time in the traditional way of doing visual effects, and just committing to it and being unhappy with it, but you had no choice because it took too long and it cost too much money.
Yeah.
So that's just a little bit into that. Did you have anything, Tyler?
Yeah, I think like one of the most kind of miraculous things that I experienced, watching Aaron had kind of adapt Unreal to a filmmaking pipeline was we were going back and forth on this one set piece. We built out an environment, and we were going to do like a screen share, all
Which
remote.
looks amazing, by the way. I mean, just to kind of give a background, we
Yeah.
decided to do this podcast after we kind of studied the environments on ArtStation. They look crazy.
No, thank you. Thanks.
Fantastic. Yeah, to that point, when we were kind of building it, we could do a screen share remotely in two completely different places. And traditional filmmaking would have been, you built the set, you prepped it all months in advance, and then you show up and you go, oh man, that in the case of Dive, let's say for one of those tunnels, like that rock face isn't quite working. We're gonna have to take like 2 days to rework it. Instead, it's like, could we shift that a little bit? And then it's like, oh yeah, no problem. A little rotate and scale in a matter of seconds and a few clicks, and all of a sudden your environment's exactly how you saw it in your head, and the lighting adapts. It's all real time, and it's great. So like just that process, just from a creative standpoint, it's just so invaluable, and allows you to iterate so quickly. And we've just it's difficult to kind of for the certain type of project, right? Especially for us, because we create pretty imaginative worlds. And for that process, being able to iterate quickly and to have stuff respond really quickly as well is just amazing for the creative process. You kind of really get to have fun again and almost go back to the way things. I think Aaron can speak to this in a great way. Really go back to the way, in many ways, that filmmaking used to be. Um,
Hmm.
it's like a new tech which allows you to be very hands-on and very creative.
Yeah, I think like another thing that kind of striking about Dive is that it's very realistic, right? So it doesn't look like it was done even as a CGI. It looks like very believable, right? And it's super important to have that when you're doing something that is not like a cartoon or even a game, but it's like a film,
Yep, absolutely.
right? So I'm wondering if you could kind of elaborate, like what are the main tools, kind of like main features that helped you kind of build on that realism? I mean, maybe you were using a lot of like megascans, maybe you were using some other tools like, I don't know, like Substance Painter or something. Like what are like the tools in your basket that allow you to kind of build this stuff and look at like it's a photo?
That's I'm glad that you think that, because that was definitely what we were achieving or trying to achieve. And I think it's still early days for us. Those a lot of the stuff that we've shown so far is just our R&D phase of working in engine for the final look of a cave, for our exploration for a movie, and then the underwater. And Megascans has been a part of it. I think that what Megascans has really pushed us is to look at how they set up their shaders, the textures, how it's utilized to optimize what you can get based on scan data. So definitely there's bits of that in it, but the majority, because we couldn't find in Megascans any real true cave scans. There's a lot of great rocks. There's a lot of landscapes. There's all kinds of great stuff. So I started doing a lot of investigating online of what's available scan data for caves, and I found a few different resources that actually was able to find that actually is true scan data of caves and stalactites and stalagmites, and they're just pieces of it. They're not like a full cave, so we had to creatively put those together and make them work. But that's kind of, I think, the principle behind our the way we're going is there is a bit of creative build, that we're doing on some of the stuff like the ruins that we're creating, and some of the other stuff that we'll have in the film, and the creatures are going to be created from scratch. But then a lot of the stuff that you want to be familiar and is real, then there's no reason to build it from scratch when you can get scanned data. And there's nothing that's going to look realer than scanned data. So, and the good thing is Unreal is able to take this information, and with its ray tracing ability and lighting, you can really represent like what feels to be a real environment, which is what we're trying to achieve. So that's great. I'm glad that you felt that it was looking very real.
Yeah, it seems it does seems that way. I mean, it looks um I mean, at least to me, it looks very realistic, right? So, and it's funny that you mentioned like scanned stuff, because it seems to me like it's probably one of the biggest advantages of like that artists are using in modern tools, right? Not only in terms of the way that it helps to kind of render realistic image, but also because it's faster, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
think like maybe 5, 7 years ago, if you were to do something like super realistic, like a video game like Crisis, you would
Yeah.
need to hire maybe, I don't know, like a whole floor of people just using ZBrush to kind of like render the texture that you want, right? And now you have all those tools that you're kind of at your hand, right? And including scans, right? Because
Yeah.
photogrammetry really changed it and kind of democratized. Because I've been doing a little bit of a research like for some other project, and it's basically cutting the production time in half. And this was like 4 years ago when Dice was playing around with it. And it seems that now it's even faster, right? Because you can upload it online. You don't even have to go and do the pictures yourself, right? So, do you guys most rely on stuff that you can purchase online and kind of play around with it and iterate, or do you actually go like on this expedition somewhere and try to take pictures and build it yourself?
Well, I think for our first R&D, it was definitely finding what we could online and purchasing scanned data. It's more like to just see what is it, how does this work before we hire a team to go out and do it and say, is this worth it? Or do we have to try a different approach? Now that we've actually done that, we actually, for Dive and for a lot of our projects, future projects, we will be hiring, we will have teams that go out and do photogrammetry to create exactly what we need, getting us exact data. But I think exactly to your point, it'll save us money, save us time, and we'll have a lot more creative control based on the fact of where do you spend the money? Like when you have a project, do you spend it building something that you can actually just go out and do photogrammetry on, or spend a bunch of hours trying to make that look real and it still doesn't. So I think that's what this the technology's really come a long way, and there's so many great tools even for like that you can get that almost anybody can do photogrammetry real easily. So it's exciting times for us to be able to, and then have a tool like Unreal that you can just go out and do a scan, bring it in, and then see it, and then move around the camera. You go, wow, I feel like I'm there. This is exciting. Now I can start making my movie.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
About Unreal, so you also mentioned that you are using a lot of the lighting tools that Unreal provides, and here on 80 level, we really like to talk about like underwater lighting and the caustics and all the other stuff. So could you talk a little bit about how you're tackling with that? Because it seems like a whole different beast when you're trying to light environments that are underwater and there's like stuff flying in the water and everything's kind of have to do shadows and stuff. I mean, I don't even know how you guys approach that.
Yeah, that's doing part of everything that we do in our design process, visual effects, or anything in general. Looking at a lot of real reference is so important. So doing a lot of research on how does water react. What is it when you're under it? How much refraction do you see when you're above it, looking down through it? And what are the caustics that are shimmering through it? How best to approach that? And then there's always like bits of debris, especially if you're that's part of this kind of environment we're creating too, is that by adding particulates and adding debris, create even more volumetrics and give you depth, more depth, and so it makes for a very cinematic visuals, which I think are very exciting for us as filmmakers, and also just for this project. And then how we're actually approaching those is really taking advantage of all the tools that Unreal has. Now ray trace is a really implemented quite well in there without really, and if you use ray trace, because ray trace can be it's one of those tricky things. It's still new days for Unreal as far as the development goes of how to optimize it. But definitely using it for lights is important. When we get into other things like beyond that, like global illumination, and some of that, it can be taxing to the graphics card and almost like slow it down to a halt. So we come up with other solutions to create bounce light that would almost, in a lot of ways, the same way you would set up a shot for a movie. You put some lights around that you want to really emphasize that kind of bounce light to create the same thing that global illumination to some extent would do, but not to all the level of taxing on the CPU and the GPU. I mean, and then as far as like the caustics, there's and the particulates. It's really got, there's some really great tools to create your own caustics, your own kind of like animated elements, and you can even, the lights themselves, you can create your own basic map or shader that goes on the front of it, so it feels like it's actually either a light from a natural source or one that's from a lamp. So it can kind of give it the breakout and all that. So all those things are things that we think about when we're moving forward. So we're not just using the tools right out of the box. We're actually starting to look at it and look at what is in nature. How do we create that thing that's in nature in Unreal, and then get creative with it. I always approach things on everything I do is try the easiest thing first. Don't overcomplicate things. And if the easiest thing works, then you're done. Or if it gets you there, 80 or 90%, then you just figure out the rest to get you to that 20 or 10%. But I think that that's been my approach from the beginning of my career is why overbuild anything? Try to figure out the easiest method to get to point A to point B to achieve what you're trying to achieve. And that's where the scan data comes in really well. That's where we have these great tools. And also I think that's my love for Unreal, is because I'm not having to wait, by building something and spending all that time building a kind of an interesting sim or something like that, and then rendering it and realize, no, that didn't work. I can see it in real time to know if it worked or not right away. So it's I can, I just love Unreal, and I love the ability, and I feel these are just the beginning pioneer days of like what's to come. It's
as far as lighting goes, and I think it also speaks to the previous topic of realism. If there's anything that will be the deal breaker for something looking real or something looking not real, it's how well the scene is lit, how well it's all lit. I think realism really at the end of the day comes down to lighting, because you can have the best materials in the world, you can have the best scan data, you can have everything, but if it's all more or less overlit or underlit, or just like, it's just the source doesn't quite, the source type doesn't work. Maybe it's too hot. Maybe it's not, whatever it is. If you can, I think one of the biggest things you can do to improve realism is just understand how light affects the world around you and implement that in Unreal. And I think Unreal has all the tools necessary, even just comes stock with all the tools necessary to be able to make something look, real world lighting scenario, basically. Like that's like the best thing I could say. It's got all the tools that come stock for you to be able to create that real world lighting that you're seeing around you. That's number one as far as I think realism goes.
No, I think to that point that Tyler just mentioned, that is lighting is, I think, key number one. I think anyone that's trying to create any environment, any world, any character, anything like that, if your lighting is poor and it's not well thought out, it will suffer. I think that you can make something that looks, that's slightly rudimentary. If it's well lit, it will look stunning. And I think
Totally.
that's what I tell a lot of my artists, anyone that comes on, that's the key thing you need to learn in creating anything that we do is understand the basic of light, the lighting basics, and what makes lighting work, and why is it powerful? How is it for photography, for cinema, but for creature designers that we do all other companies known for. It's like, what makes our creatures look really stunning? This is the way we light them. So lighting is a very important thing. So I completely concur with Tyler on that. So there you go.
Yeah, thanks for that. That was a very elaborate answer to that. So thank you. And I just want to add that maybe in games, for example, like lighting was probably one of the key technologies where most of kind of like the recent breakthroughs were made. And that's why Unreal is so popular right now with filmmakers, basically. But Unreal also, I think they kind of want to leverage that they can provide like very realistic image at the end, and they are also adding a lot of the basically tools for filmmakers, right? They have an in-engine tool for cuts, for camera, and all this stuff. I'm wondering if you can talk a bit about how you've been using it. Did you like it, or did you like it, and how do you like this cutting in real time kind of process?
Yeah, I think that it's interesting. Using the sequencer, which you can cut through using in Unreal as kind of an editing program. It's sequencer is how you set up your cameras and animate, and allows you a lot of flexibility. And you can add as many cameras as you want into a sequencer, which you can, create an edit through that process. there's sometimes when we're attempting things, it's definitely a way that I'll start using some to see like, okay, this is an angle, here's an angle, I can see it all inside Unreal. When we get into the final like real editing, as of right now, we still kind of use some of the outside like Premiere, some of the editing programs for and render out shots. And part of that reason is just because there's a lot more, some of the tools that are in Premiere and some of the other editing programs are a little bit more powerful for the editing aspect of it. And it's easier to actually just render out your scenes. But initial blocking, yes, of course, I definitely think it's powerful. We do use it for that purpose. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
basically it.
it's pretty intuitive as far as sequencer. It's pretty easy to pick up. If you have any sort of, if you've ever worked with any sort of, whether it's keyframe animation or any keyframe work in any kind of nonlinear editing, platform, whether it's Resolve or Premiere, Avid, it's pretty easy to pick up sequencer. It's more or less the same thing as far as the controls, the basic controls are concerned. So there's definitely intuitive. Setting up cameras is pretty great. The different lens packages that they have, you're actually getting a pretty decent representation of what an actual cinema camera looks like. And then you have people now who are going out there actually mapping lenses. So you can have, if you want to shoot on that, Cook Prime kit, that whole kit's going to be mapped at some point, maybe become available publicly. But certain DPs or lens owners are going out there and just mapping it themselves and having that data so they can go 1-to-1. So if you're shooting live action on a certain lens set, you can have that same lens set virtually. So I think that's a really interesting technology that's that's coming along, and it'll really make that transition between live action and virtual pieces really seamless, or at least getting even closer to being seamless. And then yeah, I think that's basically that. I think as far as project management goes, I wouldn't go so far as to say that we would feel necessarily fully confident in delivering a final feature film only editing in the sequencer in Unreal. I know you can definitely output a lot of great, you could output HDR, you can output so many super high quality images. But I think it more comes down to the scale and size of your project. I think if you're doing like a modest sequence, putting a few different shots together to do a cool like trailer cinematic or something, I think that's definitely something that's possible. But to deliver a feature, I think it might be difficult to simply for file management and simply just because you have so many different takes and shots and stuff. It's more organizational than I would say technical. I think sequencers more than capable of being able to edit shots together. You can do that. But I think from a project management standpoint, that's where using a traditional NLE is where you kind of still need to go.
That's actually a very interesting point that you're raising, because the project management perspective, the asset kind of the tools for organizing your assets in the library even, these are all the problems that I think are familiar to all the people working in film and in games. And I know that there are a lot of startups who are trying to figure out new ways to kind of organize all those huge impressive libraries that studios have on board.
Mm-hmm.
And so far most of them failed, it seems, because it's just too big of a task to tackle.
Yeah, it can
right now.
It can get huge. I mean, these libraries can get absolutely massive, and that's not even including just your exports of your shots. You have all the different pieces that go into the actual scene, and then you put on top of that having to have Unreal manage all of your editorial files. I mean, that just gets to be a very very large basket.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm sure
understand.
those tools will get even better and
Absolutely.
more efficient as time goes. These are all the fact that you can do all of this stuff, you can pretty much tackle a lot of your stuff in engine is amazing. It's just that when I think to what Tyler's saying, for a feature, it's like it becomes a bit problematic right now for an entire feature, but definitely a sequence of edits, especially if you're doing virtual production or any of that stuff that you want to just cycle through stuff real quick, then you have the ability to do that right there on the fly.
So guys, thank you for talking about like the production side of it, but we also want to touch on like what's the future and what are the plans for Dive? Like where are you going with this project? Like what do you want to do? When we're gonna see like maybe a bigger version or some new footage?
Yeah, well, I'll start off, and then Tyler can continue.
Yeah, for sure.
So part of this was, this was an idea that Tyler and I, we have a lot of different IPs that we're creating. We have a book that's being published it's a publishing company, 3D Total. It comes out in February based on one of our IPs called Tank. It's kind of like an Iron Giant. And we're going to turn that into a series, and there's a series of books. But an animated series we're hoping to do in Unreal. And we also have some other games. But Tyler and I were creating a bunch of different, basically horror, thriller, sci-fi films that can be done at a reasonable budget. And this is before the pandemic hit. So,
Yeah.
but we were thinking that, let's come up with, some concepts, because we had a bunch of different ideas, and a lot of them were very traditional, but we thought, let's try something different and unique. And now, we started getting into Unreal and figuring out, could we do some of these ideas that we're talking about? One of those was Dive, but Dive was just a series, and it is a series of a bunch of different thriller films that are all kind of environment-based thrillers that are survival films with very small cast. Usually, it's people that are everyday people, not too specialized, specialists, so that you feel like the audience can feel like they can identify with those characters better. And it was originally it was a format that we were going to try to do in IMAX, but it's evolved into a 2 hour for each of these. But we have another one after Dive, which is called Woods, and then Sands, and then continuing. But they're all different environments and with characters, and there's always a creature. And these are just the beginning of a series of IPs that we're creating. But Tyler will continue with kind of where we're going with it.
Yes. So yeah, Dive is the first as Aaron was saying. Dive's the first in the series of 3 films that we have going right now. We're in pre-production on Dive. We're going through the previs, and our goal is to previs the entire film a few months in advance, so we can understand what we're going to go shoot. Then we're going to go shoot our live action elements and see if we can take. I don't know if it's necessarily the first time, but we think it is. Certainly the way that we're going about it. We're going to look to previs the whole movie in Unreal, and then take as much of that previs to final pixels, and then deliver that. So what we're looking to do is, previs the whole thing, shoot the live action pieces that we need, and then plus up the previs to the point where we can deliver final VFX, final pixels, all having done it all in engine, and then be able to bounce that out and deliver it to the world, and create a whole different way of making movies, making feature films in Unreal. So that's the goal from a technical standpoint. From a creative standpoint, Dive is average everyday people on a diving trip that just takes a very strange turn, and they come face to face with a creature that could very well exist. There's so much of the ocean that is unmapped. There is so much of the subterranean world that is unmapped. So it's like a grounded environmental thriller where these people have to face off and try to survive the environment and survive the monster that inhabits it. And that's the through line throughout this whole series of movies that we're building. Average everyday people out there in beautiful nature end up in a survival situation, and they have to survive the natural world and the creature that inhabits it. And what you can expect is something that is beautiful to look at. It is at times horrifying, at times funny, at times heartwarming. The goal is entertainment, and to basically give people entertainment that they can enjoy, and not have to not have to go, basically not have to go to the movies and like feel sad. You know, we're not trying to. The amount of times going to a movie theater, you know, you know, life's hard enough. You go in a movie theater, and then it becomes, you know, a bit of a downer when you're in there. You know, there's definitely a time and a place, and there are amazing creative people doing those films. We have a bit more of a different take on what we'd like to offer the industry.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, you can just watch some modern Russian cinema and then be
Yeah.
depressed for the rest of your life.
Hey, I
But
love Tarkovsky though. Don't get me wrong. So
yeah. So guys, you mentioned the movie theaters. So I guess like one of the final questions is, how do you want to distribute the film? So do you want to go like a traditional way and sell it to studios, or do you want to do something online, or do you want to go to Netflix or something? Like what's a good way to kind of like try and distribute something like experimental and interesting like that?
I'd say right now, kind of where we're at, the theatrical releases right now. I think we just saw with Tenet, and that's with the weight of a massive studio and them really wanting that movie to work. I think what we saw is right now it's still uncertain what that window is going to deliver. So I am a firm believer in the theatrical experience. I think it's, you know, for movies like the ones we're making, the original intention was for it to be experienced on the biggest screen and the loudest sound system possible, right? To kind of give you that experience, and it's very difficult to replace that outside of the theater. So you know, we're kind of tracking a theatrical release and seeing kind of how things are going. This movie will most likely be distributed, you know, through streaming, whether it's through, you know, a marquee streaming service, or, you know, through, you know, VOD, SVOD. So we'll kind of see, but we're looking for a digital release as of right now, just so we can get it in front of people, as many people as we can, and then looking for a theatrical windows as soon as it becomes, you know, as soon as the time's right, more or less.
Yeah.
Aaron, do you have something to add there?
Yeah, no, I think Tyler's completely right. It is, you know, it's unknown as far as the theater surviving this pandemic we're going through. So, and we want people to see this. There may be a time later that it's distributed, you know, streaming, and then later, if it's successful, it becomes theatrical. We'll see. That's stuff. But when it comes down to it, we're maintaining all IP control in all scenarios on all of this. So we're not necessarily going to a major studio to ever deliver this. I don't think we're not abandoning that idea. But our focus is on our properties are to create and have creative control throughout this process, and kind of prove a new way of making movies, and have a fun experience for everybody. You know, so I think that it is early days, and the more that we have information, we'll definitely let everybody know how we're releasing it, where it's being released. But it will be released for sure. I can guarantee you that. As a matter of fact, it's in the process right now of all that stuff getting worked out. So that's exciting, and we're still looking, I think, for next year, 2021. We don't know exactly what time next year, but it will be 21. I think it's in some form or fashion it will be released.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you so much for coming today for our podcast. For everyone listening, please click the description. There will be links there, so you can go check out a little snippet of the future project and check out the website. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us, and hope the project will work out and and we'll be able to join you in the movies and see it, like, and not sit in our homes.
Yes, let's hope so. Thanks, Kirill. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, guys. See ya.
Take care. Bye-bye.